Теперь по поводу ПРО. Послушайте, вот здесь все очень взрослые люди и уже опытные. Мы с вами, я сейчас не буду просить, чтобы вы это все, вот так, как я скажу, отражали в своих материалах, влияли на прессу там, или как. Я просто вам, вот знаете, хочу вам лично сказать, напомнить какие-то вещи. Ведь мир избавлен от крупномасштабных войн и военных конфликтов. Мы с вами все об этом знаем. Благодаря так называемому стратегическому балансу, который был достигнут после того, как две суперядерные державы договорились фактически о сдерживании и в росте наступательных вооружений, и о сдерживании в системах противоракетной обороны. Потому что для всех понятно, если одна сторона развивает противоракетную оборону успешнее, чем вторая, то она приобретает преимущество, у нее появляется искушение использовать это оружие первой. Поэтому это один из краеугольных камней международной безопасности. Система противоракетной обороны и договоренности в этой сфере. Я далек от того, чтобы кого-то ругать, обвинять в чем-то. Но когда наши партнеры американские вышли в одностороннем порядке, они нанесли колоссальный удар, или вот это был первый удар по международной стабильности с точки зрения возможности нарушения баланса сил стратегического. Тогда я сказал, ну, мы сейчас не можем развивать эти технологии, поскольку, дорого, во-вторых, еще неизвестно, как они будут работать. Мы не будем просто деньги палить. Мы пойдем по другому пути, мы будем совершенствовать ударные системы, чтобы сохранить баланс. Только для этого. Не для того, чтобы угрожать кому-то. Нам ответили, ну да, это вот наша система ПРО не против вас, а то, что вы делаете, мы исходим из того, что это не против нас. Ну и делайте, что хотите. Я думаю, что такое столько вопроса, она связана с тем, я уже говорил, по-моему, сегодня на пленарном заседании, связано было с тем, что это же начало 2000-х годов, Россия находилась в очень сложном положении. Развал экономики, значит, фактически гражданская война и борьба с терроризмом на Кавказе, оборонная промышленность в развале, вооруженные силы в ужасном состоянии. Ну, кому в голову приходилось, что Россия сможет наращивать стратегические вооружения? Наверное, думали о том, что пройдет некоторое время, имеющиеся, доставшиеся от Советского Союза вооружения будут деградировать. Поэтому надо сказать, да делайте, что хотите. Но мы предупреждали, что мы будем это делать. Мы сказали об этом. И мы делаем. И я вас уверяю, сегодня Россия добилась существенных успехов на этом пути. Я сейчас не буду всего перечислять, но мы модернизировали наши комплексы. И успешно развиваем новые поколения. Я уже не говорю о системах преодоления, системы противоракетной обороны. Но наши партнеры, несмотря на все наши возражения, на все наши предложения о реальном сотрудничестве, не хотят с нами сотрудничать, отвергают все наши предложения и действуют по своему плану. Я сейчас не буду, некоторые вещи считаю даже пока некорректным говорить публично. Но вы можете мне верить, можете не верить. Мы предлагали конкретные элементы, конкретный вариант сотрудничества. Они реально все были отклонены. Но вот все-таки пришли к тому, что сейчас построили систему ПРО в Румынии. Говорили это все время о чем? Нам нужно защититься от иранской ядерной угрозы. Где ядерная угроза иранская? Ее нет? Договор подписали уже. И причем Соединенные Штаты были, по сути, инициаторами этого договора с Ираном. Мы помогли, мы поддержали. Но если бы не позиция США, не было бы этого договора. И это, безусловно, заслуга президента Обамы. Потому что я считаю, это договор правильный, он разрядил ситуацию вокруг Ирана. И президент Обама может записать это, безусловно, в свой послужной список как результат своей работы на этом направлении. Но угрозы нет, а система ПРО продолжает строиться. Значит, мы были правы, когда говорили, что нас обманывают. С нами неискренне, ссылаясь на якобы имеющуюся иранскую ядерную угрозу при строительстве системы ПРО. Ну так оно и есть на самом деле. В очередной раз пытались нас надуть. Сейчас построили эту систему, сейчас ставят там ракеты. Так? Но вам должно быть известно, что ракеты эти закладываются в капсулу, которая используется для пусков ракет средней дальности «Томагавк» морского базирования. Значит, туда закладывают сейчас антиракеты, способные поражать цели на расстоянии 500 километров. Но мы знаем, технологии развиваются. Мы примерно знаем, в каком году примерно американцы получат новую ракету, которая будет уже не 500 километров, а 1000, а потом больше. И с этого момента они начнут угрожать нашему ядерному потенциалу. Мы по годам знаем, что будет происходить. И они знают, что мы знаем. Это вам только вешают лапшу на уши, как у нас говорят. А вы, в свою очередь, вешаете своему населению. И люди не чувствуют опасности. Вот меня что беспокоит. Ну как мы не можем понять? Мы тащим мир вообще в совершенно новое измерение. Вот в чем проблема. Делают вид, что как будто ничего не происходит. Но я не знаю даже, как достучаться. И о чем говорят? Это часть оборонного потенциала, не наступательного. Это значит, системы, которые призваны оградить от агрессии. Это неправда, это не так. Стратегическая система противоракетной обороны – это часть наступательного стратегического потенциала. И все это работает в единой связке с наступательными ударными комплексами. Одни прикрывают, одни наносят упреждающий удар высокоточным оружием, другие прикрывают от ядерного ответного удара, третьи, значит, наносят сами ядерный удар. Это все в комплексе решается. В комплексе современного неядерного исполнения высокоточным оружием. Значит, ну ладно, вот эти противоракеты, которые будут развиваться и будут все больше и больше нам угрожать. Но вот в эти чехлы, куда закладываются антиракеты, я же сказал, что они берутся с кораблей, и там эти шахты, так скажем, используются для томагавков. Ну там можно вообще просто за несколько часов поставить туда томагавки и все. И это уже никакие не противоракеты. Откуда мы знаем, что там в этих шахтах находится? Нужно просто изменить программу. Все. Это работа абсолютно незаметна. До Румынии никто не будет знать, что там происходит. Их что, допускают румын туда, что ли? Никто не будет знать, ни румыны не будут знать, ни поляки не будут знать. Я знаю, как это делается. Это, на мой взгляд, это большая опасность. Вот когда-то мы обсуждали с нашими партнерами американскими, у них была идея создания баллистических ракет в неядерном исполнении. И мы им тогда сказали: слушайте, ну вы понимаете, что это такое или нет? Вот у вас будут стартовать ракеты с подводных лодок, с территории. Стартует баллистическая ракета. Мы же не знаем, есть там ядерная головка или нет. Какую угрозу вы будете создавать? Но, насколько нам известно, сегодня эта программа не осуществляется. Они ее остановили пока. Но это продолжают. К чему это все придет, я не знаю. Но я знаю точно, что мы вынуждены будем отвечать. Только я уже заранее знаю, чтобы нас будут обвинять опять в агрессивном поведении, хотя это только ответ. Но ясно, что мы должны будем обеспечить безопасность. Не только свою. Нам очень важно обеспечить стратегический баланс в мире. И еще раз вернусь к этому и закончу ответ на этот вопрос с того, с чего начал. Вот именно этот стратегический баланс гарантировал мир на планете, гарантировал нас от крупных вооруженных конфликтов за последние 70 лет. И это благо. Хоть оно такое, знаете, основанное как бы на взаимной угрозе, но тем не менее взаимная угроза, она обеспечила нам глобальный мир на протяжении десятилетий. Как его можно разрушить, так я не знаю. Мне кажется, что это очень опасно. Не только кажется, я в этом уверен. И люди не чувствуют опасности. Вот меня что беспокоит. Ну как мы не можем понять? Мы тащим мир вообще в совершенно новое измерение. Вот в чем проблема. Делают вид, что как будто ничего не происходит. Но я не знаю даже, как достучаться.
We're flying over Estonia now, and just over to the east, to the right, is Russia.
We need to be ready. We should not be afraid.
Ready for?
Ready for opportunistic behavior of Putin's Russia.
These US Marines are about to perform their first ever amphibious landing from the Black Sea onto the Ukrainian coastline.
15 amphibious assault vehicles packed with both US and Ukrainian Marines secured a beach south of the port city of Odessa before heading inland as part of the annual multinational naval exercise Sea Breeze.
This year the US Navy deployed 2 ships, the USS Ross, a guided missile destroyer, and this ship, the USS Whitby Island. which acted as a launching pad for the amphibious operation.
The Black Sea is bounded by 6 countries linking southeastern Europe and western Asia. Since the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014, the security situation here has been very tense at times.
Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has instructed all military units near Crimea and in the eastern Donbass region to be at their highest level of combat readiness.
We need to be ready. We should not be afraid.
Ready for?
Ready for opportunistic behavior of Putin's Russia.
Fighter jets, potentially with the complicity of the Syrian government.
The Russian president has warned against...
Putin issues a final warning to Western powers that any more disruptions with Russia, its allies or trading partners will not be tolerated. January 6, 2015. After confirmation of cooperation from the United Kingdom, a no-fly zone was placed over Syria. January 10th. A Turkish Air Force plane is shot down over eastern Syria. The same day, President Barack Obama announces to the American people, we have now declared war on Syria.
I ordered our military to take targeted action in Syria. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
The Republican-controlled Congress votes to approve a military intervention. The US and UK began to rally 12,000 troops for a fast and targeted ground invasion, in concert with air shelling over all Syrian military installments. The S&P 500 index drops under 2,000. January 12th.
This international operation is about protecting our people too, and protecting the streets of Britain should not be a task that we are prepared to entirely subcontract to other air forces of other countries.
Riots erupt in London from mass public distaste of the new Middle Eastern war. Scotland begins the process to secede after a last-minute referendum receives a 61% majority of votes. 4 countries join the Eurasian Economic Union, including Mongolia, and newly established independent Eastern Ukraine, entailing free trade and military cooperation. India is set to import a record 180 tons of gold for January and begins talks with Russia for an increased bilateral trade. January 20th. The U.S. decides to send forces without UK cooperation and sends a lackluster army of 5,000 American troops arrive in Turkey that push their way to Aleppo, Syria. In an attempt to demonize Democrats and anti-war activists, Fox has guests Jesse Ventura and Dennis Traynor.
I think it's shameful, and I think that we need new leadership in this country that changes this war mentality that the United States of America has today.
Which turns to chaos, and both guests state they would recommend burning draft cards if issued from the Selective Service. Days later, China does not attend the latest 5-year and 7-year Treasury note auction. The Federal Reserve announces a return to monthly asset purchases to maintain critical defense expenditures. February 11th, submarines went undetected to the U.S. West Coast, destroying key military targets in San Diego. U.S. Secretary of Defense announces the swift sinking of 3 Chinese submarines west of San Clemente Island. Secretary of State John Kerry appears live on CNN to declare the U.S. is now at war with China. Japan announces allegiance with the United States.
Will continue to build a strong Japan-U.S. alliance.
And supplies 12 destroyers to patrol for Chinese warships in the Pacific. Through alternative news websites, it's discovered that on January 30th, secret talks with China for U.S. debt negotiations and to reevaluate gold at $3,200 an ounce and silver at $60 an ounce were denied by the Federal Reserve. And this led to the Chinese strike on American targets. Brazil, the next day after China's attack, announces their allegiance with China against the United States, halting all imports and exports in an intent to sell their $262 billion in Treasury securities at the earliest possible auction. Senator Bernie Sanders proposes a bill to nationalize all Chinese investments in the United States. Australia comes out in the open with gold price talk, noting they would accept up to $1,500 gold price to appease Chinese, but would follow any gold price the U.S. Treasury and Fed will set. Australian coal and gold mining workers go on strike, and China responds with sending 20,000 troops into Australia to, quote, secure China's industrial mineral investments. February 17th.
The Pentagon is going to spend $7.5 billion to make emergency fixes to its nuclear weapons.
The Pentagon allocates $11.9 billion package to modernize and ready nuclear armaments at the National Nuclear Security Administration plant in Kansas City. March 1st, 2015. InfoWars founder Alex Jones has not been seen or appeared on air in the past 10 days. Senior editor Paul Joseph Watson hosts the Alex Jones Show in his absence. March 8th, U.S. troops have secured the northern half of Syria. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, states the U.S. Army has confirmed that ISIS is working side by side with the Syrian government in fighting the American surge. Russians move in to support troops to Iran. The Iranian president announces on Democracy Now! That his country will accept any number of Syrian refugees, as well as Palestinian refugees from the ongoing Israeli conflict. American media proclaims the U.S. is crying for help from the world and getting no answer. March 11th, in an attempt to arm anti-Syrian fighters, Saudi Arabia covertly deploys 13 fighter jets, but 4 are intercepted by Iran and shot down. Iran claims they were under hostile attack. Saudi Arabia and Turkey then declare war on Syria and Iran. Rumors circle that the French parliament will vote to leave the European Union, with similar talks in regards to Italy and Poland. Germany states they are remaining neutral in regards to any Eurasian military conflict. Shortly thereafter, Chancellor Angela Merkel announces her resignation. Riots in Central America have provoked a push for revolution in Venezuela. The U.S. deploys Marines and Navy SEALs to invade Cuba and Venezuela. March 13th. An explosion at Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant in California causes a further increase in exodus from California into neighboring states, especially Arizona. Mexican civilians begin pouring into Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and even some to Southern California. MSNBC and CNN pump out propaganda demanding high taxes and welfare for the poor Americans and immigrant refugees from the southern border, saying Republicans hate immigrants, while Fox News paints all of them as illegals dragging down our economy, while calling the increased spending for wars absolutely necessary. Obama prepares executive orders to give refugees American citizenship.
We'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country.
March 22nd, 8-kiloton nuclear blast has exploded in Charleston, South Carolina. 750 miles northeast, the New York Stock Exchange is shut down. CEO Alex Lundy states the drop in the markets from the S&P 1600 to 900 was a glitch caused by a hack perpetrated by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Senator John McCain, in a closed-door meeting with President and joint military chiefs, announced war with Russia, stating that Russia, along with China, have been fighting a cyber war against the U.S. for at least 2 years. What could happen next? See our ending at crushthestreet.com/war.
North Korea's vicious young dictator exploding with confidence tonight. His government's news anchor uses new, very aggressive language to project Kim Jong-un's threat.
Kim Jong-un said we now have the clear capacity to directly and realistically attack American bastards who continue to attempt to invade the Pacific.
Kim's just tested 2 medium-range ballistic missiles. One failed, but weapons monitors call the other one a partial success because the missile flew 250 miles and even briefly entered space.
Saying that he can realistically attack Americans and not just the U.S. in general, that's a new level of threatening language from Kim, right?
Yes. The potential for provocation and provocative language is enhanced by Kim by the fact that now he has the technology that goes to match the language.
When Kim perfects the so-called Musadon missiles he just tested, experts say he'll be able to strike the Aleutian Islands in Alaska or U.S. military units on Guam. A U.S. intelligence official tells CNN tonight Kim's aggressive language, his celebration of this missile launch, underscores his regime's aspiration to be recognized as a nuclear power. Analysts say Kim also wants to fend off the threat he perceives from his principal enemies, who've just wrapped up a massive military exercise on his doorstep.
He wants to deter America from even threatening to intervene. He wants to deter South Korea at the same time, obviously. And to do that, he wants to be able to say, I can attack American bases, kill Americans in their beds.
Kim's also believed to be toughening up against the U.S., possibly to extort concessions.
Any real provocation where he fires one missile off that's with a real warhead does some damage, he'll be decimated. Pyongyang will become essentially a bowl of glass, and I think he knows that.
Still, there are tens of thousands of Americans in Kim's line of fire. More than 28,000 American troops are deployed in South Korea. Analysts worry tonight that if Kim tries to provoke South Korea with artillery fire, maybe a commando raid, that a mishap, a miscalculation from Kim's forces could harm those Americans, then we could be in for a dangerous escalation.
We are just getting this in. The U.S. officials we are speaking to, Brianna, are telling CNN there was a very serious incident with the Iranian Navy yesterday. Now, this is just one day after that video everyone saw of a different incident. But yesterday, in the northern end of the Arabian Gulf, there was an Iranian fast attack craft that came out into the water and began harassing 2 U.S. Navy ships and a Kuwaiti Navy ship. The Iranians, we are told, were circling the Navy ships. They were coming close. They would not leave leave. At one point, they came within 200 yards of one of the U.S. Navy patrol craft. The Navy, following standard maritime procedure, tried to call the Iranian ship. They got no answer initially. They fired flares. They did then have, a U.S. official says, a brief radio-to-radio conversation with the Iranians, but still, the Iranians did not leave. At that point, we are told that this U.S. Navy patrol craft, the USS Squall, then made the decision and fired 3 warning shots into the water to warn the Iranians to pay attention and to back off. This is standard maritime procedure for the U.S. Navy. It rarely happens. It has happened in the past, but this is standard procedure when a U.S. Navy ship feels threatened and that threat does not back off. That is really the last resort before you take lethal action. You fire warning shots into the water. So just yesterday, 3 warning shots fired at the Iranians. And this comes one day after that video that we all saw that 4 Iranian ships, again, Revolutionary Guard Corps ships, came out and harassed another U.S. Navy ship. Perhaps the bottom line here is to note that the U.S. believes these Iranian boats belong to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is one of the most militant arms of the security and military services in Iran. This is not the regular Iranian Navy. There is always concern that these maritime forces of Iran that are doing this are not under the central control of the government, and there is always concern that things can get out of hand. The U.S. Navy yesterday taking the action to fire warning shots at the Iranians and tell them to back off.
Hey, Amra, those propaganda photos out of North Korea really are remarkable because they reveal a side of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un we don't normally see, as he was celebrating with his scientists, projecting so much confidence that he feels he has finally perfected this missile technology capable of delivering a nuclear warhead to his enemies, including the United States. Rising from the waters off the eastern Korean peninsula, an ominous new threat from North Korea, the successful test firing of submarine-launched ballistic missile Pukguksong, meaning Polaris, the North Star. A weapon North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says puts the U.S. and its allies within striking range of a nuclear attack. A triumphant announcement on the North Korean news. State propaganda images claim to show a perfect launch. Before dawn Wednesday, anxiety turns to exhilaration. Kim Jong-un and his officers smiling, laughing as they track the missile some 500 kilometers, more than 300 miles, further than any previous attempt.
The testing and the phase of the development is very rapid.
A launch attempt just last month failed. A missile fired 4 months ago in April traveled just 30 kilometers, around 18 miles. Analysts believe Wednesday's missile traveled 16 times further, meaning it can strike anywhere in South Korea, home to 50 million people and some 25,000 American troops. The latest launch as U.S. and South Korean forces engage in annual military exercises, similar to these in the spring. Pyongyang views the annual drills as a direct provocation. Troy University professor Daniel Pinkston says war games are vital to keep the peace.
Looking at North Korea's capabilities, their development programs for weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems, the shrill rhetoric that comes out of Pyongyang, their objectives are very clear.
North Korean weapons development continues at a breakneck pace, despite nearly universal condemnation and unprecedented international sanctions.
They will allocate resources from other areas and devote it to the missile and nuclear programs.
Kim Jong-un called Wednesday's before dawn launch the greatest success and victory. Feeling the intense pressure to succeed, one officer appears overcome with tears of joy, or perhaps relief.
Russia is deploying its ballistic missile and attack submarines in numbers, range, and aggression not seen in 2 decades. In an exclusive interview, the commander of U.S. naval forces in Europe tells CNN the buildup is part of an alarming strategic view.
They're very clear that NATO is viewed as an existential threat to Russia. Our military capability, they view in a very visceral way as a threat to Russia.
Adding to U.S. concern, Russia is deploying new submarines that are harder for U.S. naval forces to track and detect. Following years and billions of dollars in investment, they are quieter, better armed, and have a greater range of operation.
The submarines that we're seeing are much more stealthy. They're acoustically quieter. We're seeing them have more advanced weapon systems, missile systems that can attack land at long ranges.
The increased Russian sub-activity is backed by a much broader military expansion. Russia is adding or upgrading some 12 naval bases across the Arctic Circle, expanding its capability to send subs in numbers through the crucial Greenland-Iceland-UK gap into the Atlantic and closer to U.S. and NATO territorial waters. Moscow has also newly stationed 6 submarines in the Black Sea, giving Russia new capability into the Mediterranean. The U.S. believes the new activity is designed to deny NATO, including the U.S., the ability to operate within Russia's so-called near abroad. Increasingly alarmed by Russia's new sub-deployments, the U.S. and its NATO allies are launching new training exercises in anti-sub warfare and deploying new systems, including the P-8 Poseidon.
These are sonar buoys dropped into the water to track submarines. The plane can be equipped with torpedoes to destroy those submarines.
Russia's growing military activity extends above the surface as well. A Russian fighter jet's flyby of the USS Donald Cook this week, coming within 30 feet laterally and 100 feet vertically, is behavior that U.S. naval commanders have not witnessed since the Cold War.
We had issued radio calls in both English and Russian, and the aircraft didn't respond and proceeded on a course directly at the ship. So while we've seen these interactions before, this one was different because of the proximity to the ship, the altitude, and the flight path that it took.
These are the big guns of Russia's modern army. The Iskander-M missile system seen launching a cruise missile during a carefully choreographed training exercise in April. And yet this is not NATO's biggest fear. Last year, President Putin announced more than 40 new missiles would be added to Russia's nuclear arsenal, prompting concerns in Washington of a new Cold War.
U.S. Vice President Joe Biden says the United States and Turkey are prepared for a military solution against Islamic State in Syria if the Syrian government and rebels are unable to reach a political one.
We do know that it would be better if we could reach a political solution, but we are prepared. We're prepared, if that's not possible, to have a military solution to this operation.
The U.S. Congress has quietly moved forward with an authorization for use of military force against ISIS. Also known as an AUMF, it is required by law to conduct military operations longer than 90 days. The proposed legislation is already being referred to as a declaration of international martial law and an Unlimited War Powers Act for the president.
This resolution is a total rewrite of the War Powers Clause of the United States Constitution. Let's be clear about that. It is essentially a declaration of international martial law, a sweeping transfer of military power to the president that will allow him or her to send U.S. troops almost anywhere in the world for almost any reason with absolutely no limitations. Now, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution, it vests in Congress the responsibility to declare war. Now, many of us on both sides of the aisle have been arguing for over a year that the president right now has exceeded his constitutional authority in continuing military operations against ISIS without specific authorization from Congress.
The current military campaign against ISIS is now officially a year old and has been conducted without an authorization of force by Congress, which technically makes our campaigns in Syria and Iraq illegal. That's right, illegal. And that's why they're pushing to pass this law now, just like the other laws they pass that violate our Constitution. The USA Freedom Act, the U.S. Patriot Act, the NDAA, so on and so forth. Illegal and nobody cares.
What's wrong with you?
Your station is corrupt.
Oh, okay. Are you some kind of a constitutionalist?
This administration attempted to propose an authorization for use of military force with restricted ground operations, but that was rejected by Congress. As you can see in this article dated January 10th, the Senate Majority Leader reiterated his objection to the President's proposed authorization of force. However, last Wednesday, that all changed. Now, all of a sudden, they want war. On top of that, yesterday we had the Vice President in front of a camera on the world stage quoted as saying expanded military operations were well in the works. So they've decided to go back to war in Iraq to send troops to Syria, and we just don't know it yet. pockets of ISIS are now believed to exist in Mali, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Somalia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and in most European countries. We could be bombing radicals in London the day after this authorization takes effect. Think about that. This authorization of force extends the endless war on terror to every country where we fund terrorism. Let me say that again. This authorization of force extends the endless war on terrorism to every country where we fund terrorism.
What's wrong with you? Your station is corrupt. Okay. Are you some kind of a constitutionalist?
Can you tell us what the total number of trained fighters remains?
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five.
Are we going to supply air support for the people we train to fight ISIL?
We are, Senator.
Do those same people want to take a side down?
We're talking four or five.
The ones that we are supporting right now are focused on ISIL.
Do they have a goal to take a side down?
Senator, I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
Well, the ones we're supporting, I don't know because
it's a small number.
Do you think most people in Syria want two things? They want to fight. They want to destroy ISIL and get rid of Assad, the person who's killed 250,000 of their family. Is that really a mystery?
No, it's not.
It's not a mystery. Okay, is Russia going to fight for Assad?
Russia is fighting for Assad.
Will Iran fight for Assad?
They are doing that.
Will Hezbollah fight for Assad?
They're doing that.
When the people we train to fight ISIL turn on Assad, which they surely will, are we going to fight with them to replace Assad?
I can't answer that question, Senator.
Can you answer it, Secretary Carter?
Yeah, just to be clear, let's take the...
That day is coming.
YPG Kurds.
Do you see a scenario where the people in Syria don't take on Assad?
The people that we are equipping...
It's a small number.
...are people who live in or come from ISIL-occupied territory. And
do they want to take Assad down?
On defeating ISIL. And
do they want to take Assad down?
For the most part, they're focused on defeating...
Do they want to take Assad? Have you asked them?
We know what their intent is, and it is to fight ISIL.
Come on.
They're fighting ISIL now.
You know as well as I do, both of you know, that the average Syrian not only wants to destroy ISIL, but they're intent on destroying Assad because he's killed 250,000 of them. And here's the question for this committee. How do we leverage Assad leaving when Russia's going to fight for him, Iran's going to fight for him, Hezbollah's fight for him, and we're not going to do a damn thing to help people take him down?
The Russians are conducting military operations in the Middle East for the first time since World War II. Bombing the people that we are supporting.
It's a small number.
Steve, let me just say this.
It's an embarrassment.
So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces.
A shocking story today, everyone, in the Wall Street Journal. It says our American dollars may be getting into the hands of ISIS.
ISIL forces.
The money is reportedly getting funneled through Iraq's central bank into Iranian banks and then possibly to terrorists.
It's an embarrassment.
What should be done, what can be done in this latest chapter of the saga of ISIS getting control over our weapons, now perhaps our money?
The secret analysis by the agency you ran, the Defense Intelligence Agency, in August 2012 said, and I quote, "There is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist," it's not secret anymore, it was released under FOI. The quote is, "There is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want in order to isolate the Syrian regime." Your agency was saying, quote, "The Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria." In 2012, the US was helping coordinate arms transfers to those same groups. Why did you not stop that? You are basically saying that even in government at the time, you knew those groups were around, you saw this analysis, and you were arguing against it. But who wasn't listening?
I think the administration.
The administration turned a blind eye to your analysis.
I don't know if they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision.
A willful decision to go support an insurgency that had Salafists, Al-Qaeda, and
a
Muslim
willful
Brotherhood.
decision to do what they're doing, which you have to really ask the president, what is it that he actually is doing with the policy that is in place?
Why did you allow them to do that, General? You were in post. You were the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Well, those are policy.
I took the liberty of printing out that document.
So let's get the obvious out of the way. One half of our government still thinks it's the 1980s and that the Cold War never ended. Then there's the other part of our government, the Obama part, the radical Islamist sleeper cell part. So on the one hand, you have the Republicans in Congress waging a Cold War, and on the other hand, you have a terrorist in the White House waging a covert war against the American people. Obama bin Laden is his name, and terrorizing the American public is his game. How do we know? Well, let's check our list to see who's been naughty or nice. Who opened the borders? Obama, check. Who set up sanctuary cities? Obama, check. Who fired half the generals in the military? Double check. Who doubled the debt? Check again. Who fucked up healthcare and made it twice as expensive? Triple check. Who destroyed American families? Check. Who signed free trade agreements that ships jobs overseas? Check. Who ships guns and money to terrorists? Check. Who put in place free speech zones? Check. Who militarized the police so our country could look like Nazi Germany? Check. There's one thing missing from our list, however. Obama bin Laden still hasn't dragged us into World War III. But don't you worry, they're on the road to success. They're mooning the Chinese and they're shining the Russians. They're just begging for a war. First they staged a revolution in Ukraine, but that didn't work. Then they downed MH17 and went as far as to blame the Russians when it was obvious that they had nothing to gain from that situation. But that didn't work, so they started buzzing the Chinese military bases, and even that didn't work. But recently they downed Flight 9268. That, however, might work. But you're saying to yourself, well, that was ISIS. I saw it on the TV. Well, ladies and gentlemen, ISIS is a subsidiary of the United States government. Haven't you been watching the news? They have been bought and paid for with our tax dollars. But why, you say, why? Obama bin Laden wants to destroy America, to avenge the injustices of his ancestors, and to set up an Islamic super state for his brotherhood. What we need here, ladies and gentlemen, is a law that allows us to recall our elected officials. Countries do that all the time. Even the state of California can recall their governor. And why do they do that? Because you can't trust a politician. We need to be able to dissolve government and call special elections like every other country can. We can even call it the total recall provision. If companies can fire an employee, then we should be able to fire a politician, especially one as treasonous as Osama bin Laden. That's the only way, folks. You wouldn't buy a car without test driving it first, would you? Well, we should be able to test drive our politicians just the same. We give them until summer, and if we don't like the sound they're making, well, we can just re-vote in November. It'd be the same price with twice the guarantee. 4 years in office is far too long for a tyrant. Elected officials keep thinking they can just take us for a ride. Well, there will be no free ride, no free lunch with the Total Recall program. Total Recall. Write your congressman or congresswoman today. That's Total Recall, putting people back in charge of their government. Total Recall.
Теперь по поводу ПРО. Послушайте, вот здесь все очень взрослые люди и уже опытные. Мы с вами, я сейчас не буду просить, чтобы вы это все, вот так, как я скажу, отражали в своих материалах, влияли на прессу там, или как. Я просто вам, вот знаете, хочу вам лично сказать, напомнить какие-то вещи. Ведь мир избавлен от крупномасштабных войн и военных конфликтов. Мы с вами все об этом знаем. Благодаря так называемому стратегическому балансу, который был достигнут после того, как две суперядерные державы договорились фактически о сдерживании и в росте наступательных вооружений, и о сдерживании в системах противоракетной обороны. Потому что для всех понятно, если одна страна развивает противоракетную оборону успешнее, чем вторая, то она приобретает преимущество, и у нее появляется искушение использовать это оружие первой. Поэтому это один из краеугольных камней международной безопасности. Система противоракетной обороны и договоренности в этой сфере. Я далек от того, чтобы кого-то ругать, обвинять в чем-то. Но когда наши партнеры американские вышли в одностороннем порядке, они нанесли колоссальный удар, или вот это был первый удар по международной стабильности с точки зрения возможности нарушения баланса сил стратегического. Тогда я сказал, ну, мы сейчас не можем развивать эти технологии, поскольку, дорого, во-вторых, еще неизвестно, как они будут работать. Мы не будем тратить деньги полить. Мы пойдем по другому пути, мы будем совершенствовать ударные системы, чтобы сохранить баланс. Только для этого. Не для того, чтобы угрожать кому-то. Нам ответили, ну да, это вот наша система ПРО не против вас, а то, что вы делаете, мы исходим из того, что это не против нас. Ну и делайте, что хотите. Я думаю, что такая постановка вопроса, она связана с тем, я уже говорил, по-моему, сегодня на пленарном заседании, связана была с тем, что это же начало 2000-х годов, Россия находилась в очень сложном положении. Развал экономики, значит, фактически гражданская война и борьба с терроризмом на Кавказе, оборонная промышленность в развале, вооруженные силы в ужасном состоянии. Ну, кому в голову приходилось, что Россия сможет наращивать стратегические вооружения? Наверное, думали о том, что пройдет некоторое время, имеющиеся, доставшиеся от Советского Союза вооружения будут деградировать. Поэтому сказать, да делайте, что хотите. Но мы предупреждали, что мы будем это делать. Мы сказали об этом. И мы делаем. И я вас уверяю, сегодня Россия добилась существенных успехов на этом пути. Я сейчас не буду всего перечислять, но мы модернизировали наши комплексы. И успешно развиваем новые поколения. Я уже не говорю о системах преодоления, системах противоракетной обороны. Но наши партнеры, несмотря на все наши возражения, на все наши предложения о реальном сотрудничестве, не хотят с нами сотрудничать, отвергают все наши предложения и действуют по своему плану. Я сейчас не буду, некоторые вещи считаю даже пока некорректным говорить публично. Но можете мне верить, можете не верить. Мы предлагали конкретные элементы, конкретный вариант сотрудничества. Они реально все были отклонены. Но вот все-таки пришли к тому, что сейчас построили систему ПРО в Румынии. Говорили это все время о чем? Нам нужно защититься от иранской ядерной угрозы. Где ядерная угроза иранская? Ее нет? Договор подписали уже. И причем Соединенные Штаты были, по сути, инициаторами этого договора с Ираном. Мы помогли, мы поддержали. Но если бы не позиция США, не было бы этого договора. И это, безусловно, заслуга президента Обамы. Потому что я считаю, это договор правильный, он разрядил ситуацию вокруг Ирана. И президент Обама может записать это, безусловно, в свой послужной список как результат своей работы на этом направлении. Но угрозы нет, а система ПРО продолжает строиться. Значит, мы были правы, когда говорили, что нас обманывают, с нами неискренне, ссылаясь на якобы имеющуюся иранскую ядерную угрозу при строительстве системы ПРО. Ну, так оно и есть, на самом деле. В очередной раз пытались нас надуть. Сейчас построили эту систему, сейчас ставят там ракеты. Так? Но вам должно быть известно, что ракеты эти закладываются в капсулу, которая используется для пусков ракет средней дальности «Томагавк» морского базирования. Значит, туда закладывают сейчас антиракеты, способные поражать цели на расстоянии 500 километров. Но мы знаем, технологии развиваются. Мы примерно знаем, в каком году примерно американцы получат новую ракету, которая будет уже не 500 километров, а 1000, а потом больше. И с этого момента они начнут угрожать нашему ядерному потенциалу. Мы по годам знаем, что будет происходить. И они знают, что мы знаем. Это вам только вешают лапшу на уши, как у нас говорят.